The Dance of Death, Danse Macabre. The Middle Ages were an age of fear. Famine, war, and pestilence stalked every village, every castle, every kingdom. In the shadows of plague and fire, one truth rang louder than church bells. Death spared no one. It took kings from their thrones, priests from their pulpits, and peasants from their fields. Rich or poor, noble or beggar, all would dance the same final dance. It was called the Danse Macabre, the Dance of Death. The image was everywhere. On crumbling church walls, in prayer books, etched into woodcuts sold in crowded markets. Skeletons, half-rotted corpses, and figures of decay led men and women of all stations into the grave. A bishop, still clutching his crozier, dragged into the darkness by bony hands. A queen in silk robes, pulled from her throne by a grinning skull. A plowman, too, with dirt still clinging to his hands, forced into step with nobles and knights. Death was not choosy. Death was the great equalizer. This macabre vision was born from suffering. The Black Death swept through Europe in the mid-14th century, killing tens of millions. Entire villages vanished. Fields went untended. Corpses piled in the streets until pits overflowed. The survivors lived with the stench of rot in their nostrils and the memory of loved ones lowered into shallow graves. Artists, priests, and poets turned to the only truth they knew, that death would come for all. Yet there was a strange comfort in it. For in the Danse Macabre, no man was greater than another. The emperor and the beggar, the knight and the monk, each was a partner in the dance. Death would not be bribed, nor deceived, nor fought off with sword or sermon. It was just in its own cruel way. The images were grotesque. Skeletons grinning with broken teeth. Worms slithering through eye sockets. Cadavers still wrapped in rags of flesh, their hands tugging the living into eternal steps. In frescoes, they carried fiddles, drums, bagpipes, as if death itself was a musician leading mankind into the abyss. The songs were silent, yet the people who gazed on them could almost hear the beat. Slow, mocking, relentless. The sermons of the priests echoed the paintings. They warned their flocks that death was always near, lurking behind the veil of daily life. Cough could be plague. A wound could fester and rot. A band of soldiers might descend on a peaceful village before dawn. Life was fragile and eternity stretched long. Prepare for death, they said, for no one knows the hour. But fear was not the only message. The Danse Macabre was also a lesson in humility. The great lords who built towering castles, the kings who claimed divine right, the bishops who ruled with gold and relics, all would lose everything in the grave. No crown would protect a monarch from decay. No book of scripture could shield a priest from the worms. Death was not impressed by wealth or power. The people, too, embraced this vision. Minstrels sang songs of the dance, mocking nobles, reminding them that their silk robes would one day rot like any peasant's rags. Villagers painted crude images on tavern walls, showing skeletons drinking, feasting, and cavorting with the living. In the shadow of so much misery, laughter and horror became one. The dance of death did not stay in art. It became part of ritual. In some towns, processions of masked dancers paraded through the streets, dressed as skeletons, ringing bells and chanting dirges. The living marched with the dead, blurring the line between flesh and bone. Children clung to their mothers as skeletal figures rattled chains, whispering that their time would come. And in truth, it always did. The graves of medieval Europe filled faster than they could be dug. In cities, bones were exhumed to make room for the newly dead, the older remains stacked neatly in ossuaries. Skulls stared from the walls of charnel houses, hollow-eyed witnesses to centuries of death. The Danse Macabre was not just a metaphor, It was carved into the very stones of the world. One of the most famous murals of the dance adorned the walls of a Paris cemetery. Beneath its grinning skeletons, generations of mourners walked, reminded with each visit that they too would join the dance. Kings came to bury their dead, peasants came to pray for lost children, and all saw the same images. Death clasping hands with the living, dragging them to the grave. In this grim art, there was both terror and truth. For in the Middle Ages, death was not hidden. It was not pushed away into hospitals or whispered of behind closed doors. It walked openly in the streets, in the smoke of plague pyres, in the blackened ruins of war, in the shallow graves at the edge of every village. People saw it, smelled it, felt it in the marrow of their bones. And so they painted it, sang it, and feared it. The dance of death was not an illusion. It was reality. And yet, there was beauty in its horror. For the Danse Macabre was also a mirror, forcing men and women to confront their vanity, their pride, their fleeting grasp on life. It told kings that their crowns were hollow. It told peasants that even kings must die. It told all that the grave was patient, and that one day, the rattling music of bones would call their name. The Middle Ages have long passed, but the dance has not ended. The images still remain, on faded walls, in old books, in whispers carried by time. Skeletons still beckon from the shadows, reminding us of the truth the medieval world knew so well, that life is short, that death is certain, and that in the end we all must join the Danse Macabre.
The Middle Ages were an age of fear. War, famine, and plague walked hand in hand, and behind them came death, who spared no one. Kings, queens, bishops, peasants, merchants, and children, all were dragged into the same grave. We called it the Danse Macabre, the dance of death. It was born from suffering. First came famine, when rains rotted the crops and hunger hollowed entire villages. Then war, when soldiers slaughtered without mercy, leaving towns in flames. And then the Black Death, which smothered Europe in its shadow. The plague blackened the flesh, swelled the body with foul buboes, and carried away millions. Bells tolled without end, and the earth groaned beneath the weight of corpses. In the face of such terror, the Danse Macabre appeared in art, sermons, and song. On church walls, skeletons grinned as they clasped the hands of the living, emperors, bishops, peasants, maidens, all marching together into the darkness. In manuscripts, they played fiddles and drums, mocking the living with their hollow laughter. The message was clear: death spares no one. I remember the mural at the Cemetery of the Innocents in Paris. Kings, queens, and peasants alike were dragged by skeletons into the dance. Some clung to crowns, some to crosses, others to bags of coin, yet none could resist. The skeletons laughed, jaws locked in eternal grins. I saw the truth with my own eyes. A nobleman sealed himself in his castle during the plague, feasting while the poor died outside. But death entered his hall nonetheless. His wife coughed blood, his children blackened with sores, his knights collapsed one by one. At last, he died alone among corpses, his crown rolling into the dirt. The grave did not care for his power. Nor did it care for the poor. I once saw a peasant woman carry her dead child to a church, begging for burial. But the yard was full, and the priest refused. She wept in the street until sickness claimed her too. Mother and child were thrown into a pit, nameless, forgotten, yet equal in death to any king. That was the lesson of the Danse Macabre, that all men are equal before the grave. No prayer, no relic, no fortress, no crown could bribe death. The emperor and the beggar, the bishop and the thief, all must dance. And so it spread. During festivals, men dressed as skeletons and marched through towns, rattling chains. Minstrels sang of the dance in taverns. Priests spoke of it from pulpits, warning their flocks that life is brief and eternity is long. In charnel houses, skulls stared from the walls, whispering their silent reminder, "Join us." The Danse Macabre was not just an image, but a truth carved into the bones of an age. It mocked our pride, stripped away our illusions, and showed us that death is the only certainty. Life is short. Death is certain. And the dance is eternal.